Good afternoon. We are delighted to have with us today Natalia Fabra. Natalia is a professor of economics at University Carlos III in Madrid, and she's also founder and director of the Energy Eco Lab, and she's a principal investigator of an ERC advanced grant. Natalia holds a PhD in economics from the European University Institute. She speaks Italian fluently. She's a fellow at CPR CESIFO. She's associate member of the Toulouse School of Economics, and she belongs to the advisory group of the competition policy of the European Commission and many other things. Her research interests are in the field of industrial organization, and she does work at the interplay between energy and environmental economics on the one hand, and regulation and competition policy on the other. She has published extensively, including leading journals like the American Economic Review, Management Science, the Rand Journal of Economics, the International Journal of Industrial Organization, and she's also, this is the last thing to say, associate editor of the Economic Journal, the Journal of European Economic Association, the International Journal of Industrial Organization, and she sits in the Scientific Council of Bruegel. Natalia is going to give a talk on phasing renewable energies, phasing in renewable energies, phasing out coal, the local labor market effects. Thank you very much for being here. Natalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm extremely pleased to be here and being able to share with you my ongoing work on this research agenda that has to do with the socioeconomic effects of the energy transition, paying very close attention to the local effects of these policies. And when we are talking about local effects, it's certainly very important to look at what is happening in the municipalities where we are opening in new renewable power plants, but also looking at what happens in those municipalities in which we are closing down the coal power plants. So one of the, you're going to see, common threads of this research agenda is to try to see whether the losers get to find new opportunities in the new shining sector, which is the green sector, in this case, the renewable power sector, or whether those communities and those workers that are impacted by the close down of the power plants get affected forever and ever, or whether there is any hope brought about by these new investments. I know there's many people here at the Fondazione who work very closely on this topic, and this is why it's particularly rewarding for me to be presenting this work here. So please feel free to interrupt and provide comments as I go along. So it's clear, this is very well known. The energy transition implies that first we have to decarbonize the power sector. The power sector is a pillar of the energy transition. There are other sectors of the economy, including transportation and industry, that find it more difficult to incorporate renewable energies into their production process. However, in the power sector, we can introduce renewable energies, solar and wind, and as we do so, we are going to be cleaning the energy matrix that is going to provide clean power to the other sectors through electrification. But in order to do that, we first have to clean up the power sector by closing down fossil fuels, coal and gas, while at the same time we do massive investments into renewable energies. The question is whether this technological transition that we have to accomplish goes hand in hand with a transition as well in the labor market, and this is what this research agenda is really about. So we have to massively invest in renewable investments, and this clearly brings challenges, but also opportunities. Among the opportunities, there's certainly the labor market effects. We know that these investments bring in new jobs globally, but the question is whether these jobs also stay or remain within the municipalities that host the investments, and this is very much related to how the local communities respond to these new investments in their municipalities. At the same time, we are phasing out coal. Coal remains a significant part of Europe's energy mix, but we have to phase it out, certainly, if we are serious about becoming climate neutral by 2050. And this will have a very strong impact on the workers and their communities that are reliant on coal. So we want to understand what are the socioeconomic implications of plant closures, and we want to understand how long do they persist, and whether these adverse effects are mitigated by the opportunities that open up in the municipalities where we increase renewable energy investments. I believe that these issues are truly critical to understand the social acceptance of the energy transition. And without social acceptance, the energy transition is simply not going to take place. So let me stress, we want to understand, is there an energy transition in the labor market? And do workers displaced by the coal phase out benefit from the renewable phase, phasing? Today, I'm not going to be presenting a paper. This is really about the topics that I'm currently interested in. And if you make the weighted average of the two papers that I'm going to be presenting to you, probably this would be a standard paper. As it happens to be the case, I'm going to be presenting a paper that is just been accepted. It's already published. And at the same time, I'm going to be presenting a paper that is not finished. It's clearly work in progress. So I would be very happy to get your comments on this paper. As you will see, there are some results that we haven't finished yet. So hopefully in some years in the future, I'll be able to provide the whole story underlying these questions. So let me start with the shining side of the equation, which is phasing in renewables. This comes from news in the Spanish newspaper El País. This news was paid by an electricity company. In this news, they highlight that whenever there's a new power plant in the Spain, we call it España vacía, means these rural areas in Spain where there's very few people, where people are typically migrating to the cities. Well, this article is stressing the fact that renewable energies can truly become a source of wealth to these municipalities. They can revitalize the municipalities, certainly during construction. These workers that have to come to work in the construction of the plants, they consume, they sleep in the municipalities, they bring new money to the municipal coffers, they allow for training and jobs for the neighbors, and they alleviate the structural depopulation. So by reading this article, as well as many others, one would expect to find that people in the municipalities would be so eager to receive these investments. Yet at the same time, very often we find that the opposite. We find that there's quite a lot of opposition from local communities. They claim that there's adverse impacts on biodiversity, the landscape, land prices, and the real estate. And probably there's many other things going on that probably explain this opposition. But what we want to understand is not the cost side. It's not whether there's these adverse effects, but rather whether, despite the local cost, whether there's enough benefits that would compensate for whatever the cost people feel there. And one source of local benefits is certainly through the labor market. And this is why we put our emphasis on this question as to how many jobs created or triggered by the construction of the plants stay within the municipality where the renewable investment occurs. So we're going to be focusing on the local labor market effects of these investments. We are going to study the case of Spain, that has really become a leader into the deployment of renewable energies since 2006 until very recently as we speak. Our focus is going to be on the second wave of renewable investments, when, as you will see, there's massive investments going on in very large plants, both solar and wind. So our analysis is going to be exploiting this very rich variation in the timing and in the size of the solar and the wind power plants across the territory, across more than 3,900 municipalities. This is going to allow us to explore the differential effects of solar and wind investments. It's going to allow us to understand whether the effects are only local or whether there are positive spillovers coming from investments in neighboring municipalities, and whether there's other positive socioeconomic effects beyond the labor market effects, including, as the article said, money in the municipal coffers, which could also become a source of positive income effects. The literature on this topic is long. Francesco has contributed to this literature. There are some papers on the local effects of wind, some papers on the local effects of other type of energy infrastructure facilities, local effects of public spending problems, estimation of the job multipliers of green investment. So where do we contribute to this literature? Well, we claim to be one of the very first paper in quantifying the local effects and the effects on labor market effects, but also other socioeconomic variables of solar. So there's papers out there looking at wind, but we think it's very rich to really look at the comparison of these two sources. One might think that renewables is just one thing, but as you will see, the technology really matters and really matters for the type of labor market effects that you are going to see. And the timing also matters. So capturing and uncovering the dynamic effects of these investments, we believe it's also very interesting and very necessary to understand some of the phenomena that we find, for instance, on migration, to name just one. So here you have a sense of the scale of the investments, renewable investment, solar and wind in Spain. Solar really spread out across the country. Wind tends to be more concentrated in the northern part of the country, also on the coast, which tend to be more windy. And given that all these plants are registered in a national register, then we can have information about all the nitty-gritty details of the plants, including the technology, the capacity, the exact location of the plant, when the plant started to produce electricity, and so on and so forth. We don't know when construction started, so this is going to be an analysis in which the treatment effect, the date of the treatment is unknown, and we are going to try to uncover this by looking at when the multiplier effects of these investments start being positive. So just a quick overview for you to see over time, the investments that took place in Spain. In solar, there's been two waves. An initial wave when the average size of the plants was very little. These were many small power plants across the country, many of them, but very little. And then a big second wave in which there's a lot of investment, but the size of the plant is completely different. We are moving, because of technological reasons, from very small power plants to very large power plants. So we think this makes it necessary to analyze the two waves separately from each other. And the results that I'm going to present to you pertain to this most recent wave. And later on, I can provide more details about the comparison between the two. With wind, the story is a bit different. Wind has been traditionally a more mature technology. So already in the first wave, the size of the power plants was very similar to the size of the power plants that we see in the second wave. So this technological difference applies mainly to solar, but again, we are going to be focusing on the most recent wave in both cases. Very quickly, it is important to understand the differences between these two technologies, particularly regarding the tasks that are involved in the construction of solar plants and wind plants. As you can see, most of the work involves civil engineering, civil construction that it's relatively simple because the foundation of the solar panels need not be very deep. So very often the workers that are needed for this type of construction activities are not really specialized workers. Once most of the construction is done, then there's the job of the electricians and most of the electric work until the plant is ready to start producing electricity. The tasks involved in wind are much more specialized. Now, Wind power plants tend to be extremely large equipment that affects the type of transportation equipment that is needed, and the skills of the workers that are involved in the construction of the power plant, not just to build the power plant, but also to maintain the power plant. And as you're gonna see, this is probably gonna be very important in explaining the type of effects that we find. Yes. Yes, we are. Yeah, that's a great question. Our analysis doesn't include, say, home appliances or panels that you install in the roof of your house. It's just grid solar, that is power plants that are directly connected to the grid. Okay. But yeah, that's a very good point. The labor market effects are extremely different if we're talking about solar panels on the roof as compared to grid solar. Okay, so we're going to be using publicly available data sources on local employment and unemployment data. And without going into the nitty-gritty details, let me stress a very important difference between the two. When we are talking about employment, we are talking about jobs at firms that are registered at the municipality. So people working in those firms can well be people who are commuting, they live elsewhere, and they commute and work in the municipality, but they are hired by a local firm. Whereas when we're talking about unemployment, it's really unemployment by residents within the municipality. So as you can see, they're providing different evidence on a similar phenomenon, which is the local labor market effects. We believe that combining these two sources of data is going to provide a richer picture as to what is going on in the local labor market, but there need not be a one-to-one relationship between the two, as you're gonna see. We're going to rely on a method called local projections approach to differences in differences, which is more commonly used or familiar to people working in macro finance. In reality, this is nothing but a richer event study. So what the local projection approach does is it's try to analyze. So at different moments of time, at different horizons age, the impact of our treatment. So in our case, the treatment is going to be the increase in solar capacity in a given municipality, or the increase in wind capacity in a in a wind municipality. And we are going to try to understand what are the effects of these new investments into the outcome variable, whether it's employment, unemployment, or income, or the other socioeconomic variables that we are going to try to measure some periods before and some periods after the treatment. So our parameters of interest are going to be these betas, which are the job multipliers, the dynamic job multipliers across time before and after the startup date. And remember that we don't really know what the true treatment date is, which should be the start of the construction, but we don't know when the construction starts. In this specification, we are also able to introduce an additional term here, which is trying to capture the spatial effects, that is, whether investments in some neighboring municipalities, so municipalities which are around a certain radius, say 30 kilometers around the municipality, whether investments in those municipalities whether they have an impact on our outcome variables, that is employment or unemployment in the municipality that we are studying. Let me jump straight into the results, probably the main results of the paper. If I had to choose one figure illustrating the paper, it would be this one. So let me first focus on this one. This figure is reporting the multipliers of solar investments relative to the startup date. So at time tau, which is highlighted here with this red vertical line, we know that the plant is ready to start producing electricity. The investments in solar plants, if you look at any sort of report, they tell you that they normally last for 1 year on 1 year and a half. And when we look at our estimated multipliers, what we find is really consistent with what somebody would expect. We start seeing positive multipliers around 1 year and a half before the startup date. They go up when most of the construction is taking place, and once all the construction is done, and then we get the electricians coming in and work with the wires and whatever that is, then we see that the job multipliers fall down, because probably the most labor-intensive activity is the construction. So the first thing I want to highlight is the parallel trends assumption is satisfied, because 3 years before the plant is ready, one would expect that nothing has started to occur yet. And indeed, our treated municipalities are not different as the control municipalities. That is satisfied. So we take this to be the causal impact of the investments on the local employment in the municipality. How do I read these multipliers? Well, this says that at the peak, we have 1 additional local job per megawatt installed. Okay, so bigger plants, they clearly bring new additional jobs, but the average multiplier is 1 per 1 mega. So for you to have a sense of what I'm talking about, we have power plants that are 100 to 200 megawatts large. So this would imply 200 additional jobs in local firms created by these power plants.
Yeah, I have a question that is not really related to the paper that has been published already. So actually, I think the question is about, I mean, we have a very interesting discussion with Natalia at lunch about the political economy feedback on acceptability of this type of effect, no? And I'm curious to, I mean, I was wondering whether, I mean, if you, when you observe the power plant, you observe it when you start having a negative effect on jobs compared to before. I mean, you bring all these people in constructing the plant, but then after you have the plant, you observe the plant, later you see that there are less jobs than before.
Of course, these are jobs related to the construction. So you get this big boom in jobs, or I don't know how big that is, but you get a positive impact during construction. And then these people, they lose their jobs, because for the maintenance activities, you need no jobs, as it's very clear from.
And you have to manage these job losses. Actually, so it's a paradox, because you create jobs and then you have to manage when you observe the plant. So actually, I think for the acceptability of this,
absolutely,
can be an issue.
Absolutely, I fully agree. The question is whether these investments, they create additional effects that are long lasting. So for instance, whether these plans bring in new tax revenues for the municipality, whether the municipality is using those tax revenues to provide public services in the municipality that help convince these people who came to the municipality to work on the construction to stay. So one of the related papers that we're working on in this research agenda is precisely the population effects, the migration effects. Do people come and do they stay, or they come, they work, and then they leave? And whether those effects really are related to the job multipliers that we find. Because we just talk about the multipliers related to solar, but let's focus on wind. You know, the comparison is extremely stark, because wind has some positive, very timid positive multipliers during the construction, but they are 1/5 of what we find in solar. So when we are talking about the labor market effects of renewable energies, we should make a very clear distinction between the effects of solar and the effects of wind. And our very preliminary results regarding the impact of migration, which is somehow related to what you're asking, Francesco, is that solar investments, they bring in new people to the municipality. Wind investments, they don't bring in new people to the municipality, because probably what is going on here is that the workers who are working in the construction of the wind power plants, they live somewhere else, they commute to the municipality. These are highly specialized workers that move from one construction site to the other, and therefore they don't create new jobs in the municipality, they don't bring new people who are gonna stay, and so on and so forth. Okay?
Basically, they create temporary jobs, but not permanent jobs.
Yeah, probably it's permanent jobs, but from people who do not live in the municipality and who are not going to stay in the municipality. They just come, get the job done, and go somewhere else. And as I said, I think probably this is explained, but probably this is something that we can work on by the type of skills that are required. Also, and this is not to put the blame on the companies, also because in these municipalities where the investments are located, they simply don't find workers with the skills that are necessary to carry out the jobs.
The labor market around the municipality itself is maybe something we already do. Because, for example, in the political economy literature, they say if you look at it narrowly, the municipality level, you can see that the negative externality effects prevail for the unintended impact. But if you are larger, it's so much larger, larger maybe of the positive effects in something relevant.
I fully agree with you, and we have been playing around with looking at the effects at the county level. We also do this analysis of the spatial effects that I'm going to explain to you later on. Then there's a trade-off, because it's true that there might be some spatial spillovers, but at the same time, then we are losing the focus of what is truly local. Right? So you want to go large to be able to internalize all the effects, but you don't want to go too large, because then it means that the benefits go somewhere else, not precisely where you're interested in, which is the local municipality. Yet there's some evidence here that can point towards that direction. One is comparing the results on unemployment versus those of employment. And what we can see, again, if we look at the effects of solar and winds, the results are very consistent. We see a reduction in unemployment during the same period for solar, a much smaller and clearly not even significantly different from zero in the case of wind. But if we look at the numbers, the reduction in unemployment is much smaller as compared to the number of jobs that are created, meaning probably that some of these new jobs are filling by people who are non-residents. It's people who commute to the municipality that are employed by the local firm, but there are no residents, because we don't see that the magnitude of the reduction in unemployment is of the same scale as the increase in the new jobs. Francesca.
More periods after the shock. I mean, you don't have your data limitation to extend on the right.
Yeah, we do, because I didn't say that, but we are controlling, at this moment of time, maybe some construction of future plants has already started. So we need to control for future investment. So at some point, if we start adding more periods after, then we are no longer able to control for future investments. But we have tried in some specifications to do that, and we see that this remains around zero no matter what. So this result that during the maintenance activities do not bring in new jobs seems to be fairly robust. Mattia. Yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point. Unemployment is good because it's truly providing information about the residents, but it's bad because it's not controlling for the participation rate. We don't know the participation rate, so we cannot do that. This is why we think that these two data sources are really complementary. But yes, it could well be the case that participation rates have been I don't know, going up or down, and these results are biased if changes in participation rates take place at the same time. Answering your question, if we allow for spatial effects, that is, if we try to see, what happens when some neighboring municipalities open power plants, do my residents, do they benefit? Because if that was the case, then my baseline estimates, they would be biased. When we allow for that, we see that in the case of solar, the spatial effects do not seem to be adding much. Indeed, our baseline estimates are very close. Our local estimates are very close to our baseline estimates. But in the case of wind, something seems to be going on. It seems that some residents are truly benefiting both during construction as well as, let me start again. In the case of wind, which is this line, for employment and unemployment, it seems that unemployment is going down because of the investments in neighboring municipalities, meaning that our initial baseline is a bit misspecified, in which it was capturing truly the effects not of local investments, but the effects of investments taking place somewhere else. So the baseline multipliers, in reality, the local ones are even smaller than the ones that are reported. I want to go fast because I won't have time to present any results on coal. Let me just show you quickly some of the additional evidence that we report in the paper. An interesting question, and I was discussing about this with Francesco before, is whether these jobs that we report are truly direct jobs or indirect jobs, because what we report is the overall change in employment and unemployment in the municipality. And in order to provide some evidence on this, what we do is we look at employment effects at the industry level. So the way to read these very small figures is we have reported the effects for the different industries in ascending order and according to their NACE code. And I have marked in red certain industries, including construction of buildings, civil engineering, and specialized construction. And what we can get out of these figures, by the way, this report the effects 2 periods after, 1 period after, during the startup date, and the year later, what we find is that indeed, where we see some action, if any, is in the activities that are mostly related to the construction, providing evidence that probably most of these jobs are truly direct jobs and not so much indirect jobs. Interestingly, in the case of wind, we see some action in the food and beverage services industry. So this story that these workers who commute really have to pay for a hotel because they are commuting, is consistent with this evidence. This industry is benefited from these investments precisely because people have to come and they have to get a room in a hotel and eat and so on and so forth. So we see that mainly during construction, this activity has positive job increases. We also look at the local fiscal effects, and we look at the impact, the income impacts, the per capita income and wages, and we see that some action is taking place. Notably, these impacts are stronger in the case of wind. We see that there are bigger increases in per capita income. And when we look into the local finances, we see that the main channel is real estate returns and capital gains, which might be consistent with the fact that the landowners, they have to rent the land, and probably they get additional income, not because there's general equilibrium effects within the municipality, but rather because they get these rental fees that can also talk to the local attitudes towards renewables. If some of the income wealth are concentrated into the landowners, and if these investments do not create additional local jobs, it means that the benefits are concentrated in very few hands, which again might explain why residents are not so happy about having these investments into their municipality. So main takeaways, important differences across technologies, stronger effects on employment than on unemployment, revealing that probably some of the new jobs go to people who do not live in the municipality. Very weak, but in some cases positive geographical spillovers, very weak indirect employment effects, and some positive effects through public spending and improvements in average per capita income, however it is distributed. Okay, so this is the positive side of the equation. Now, unfortunately, we also need to look at the brown side of the equation, which is coal power plants. We are phasing them out. What are the social economic impacts of these, and whether the adverse implications of the coal phase out, whether they are mitigated or not through the labor transition towards the green activities. Okay, so similarly as in the other paper, but with different methodology, in some cases different data sources, we also want to estimate the local labor market effects of the coal phase out, and probably this is why I'm very keen of presenting the two papers together, because I see them as similar exercises, but looking at different sides of the same problem. Again, here, Spain provides a very nice example, because in the last very few years, especially starting in 2017, 2019, 15 out of the existing 11 out of the 15 existing coal power plants have been shut down. So nowadays there's only 4 remaining power plants, coal power plants that are operated, and 11 out of those have been shut down in the last 2 to 3 years. So it provides a very nice natural setup to study the local effects on unemployment, employment, and population of the local phase out. We understand that in this case, there's quite a lot of heterogeneity because it's not the same closing down a coal power plant in a rural area as it is closing down a power plant in a city. So we think it's very important to look at different levels of aggregation. We want to get the broad picture of the effects by looking at what happens at the national level, and we are going to use an event study like Callaway and Santana. So think of these coal power plants closing down as a staggered adoption type of model. But to uncover the existing heterogeneity across these plant closures, we're going to do case study at the plant level through synthetic controls. And what we are currently working on, which for us is probably the most promising part of the study, is to use worker level data to try to see, well, the workers that were living in these municipalities, working for these power plants, where have they gone, in which type of activities are they working, and do these have to do or not with the new renewable jobs that pop up in these new municipalities where the investments are taking place. So the main research questions are, what about the local labor market effects? What are the main margins of adjustment? How long do the effects last? Do these municipalities ever recover or not? What are the characteristics of the local economy that increase the likelihoods of recovery? And what happens to the worker? Do they truly benefit from the transition or do they not? Okay. So these are the questions we are very keen on analyzing. We have a lot of homework here, so I cannot provide answers to these questions, but at least share with you the type of research questions we are interested in. Of course, this question is very much related with a very large body of literature that have looked at the effects of the industrial decline. So there's many papers on the Rust Belt, what has happened to the local communities, or the China shock, and as well as many other papers. So the body of work that is related to this paper is very large. Also including papers that have looked at place-based initiatives aimed at boosting local activity. So what are we truly providing beyond what we already know about the local effects of a declining and economic activity? Well, this issue that I'm trying to stress, which is not only we are phasing out one activity, but at the same time we are also phasing in a new activity. So is there any sort of communication? Is there any sort of transition between these two? When there's an industrial decline, there's an industrial decline, and that's it. Here there's a decline in coal, and there's new activities coming in through renewables. Is there a labor transition in that sense? Okay, and this is really where we want to put our emphasis. So data very similar to the data that I explained before. In addition, we are going to be looking at population presence in each of the municipalities, internal migration, as you're going to see, and we have had access to the universe of affiliated histories since 2017, which allow us to track all the workers. We know when they work and when they do not work, the type of contract that they have, the industry in which they work, the province in which they live, their age, and the gender. So hopefully this is going to allow us to eventually track these labor market transitions. For the national level analysis, as I said, we use a Callaway and Santana event study type of analysis. So we are going to be estimating the impacts around the closure of the power plant. We are going to be looking at employment, unemployment, and population controlling for region and year fixed effects. So let me show you the results straight. Sorry, I jumped too fast. This is the map of Spain, and these are the closure of the power plants that are part of our study. These are all the coal power plants whose closure was announced in 2017, 2018. These are not all the coal power plants in Spain. All the coal plants in Spain are the ones here marked with circles. The ones that we consider to be our treatments are the ones in red, which are the ones that you saw in the previous map. In addition, there's these purple circles, which are either plants that have not yet closed down or plants that closed down many years ago. So we are going to exclude them from our sample so as not to confound the effects. Other than this, our control areas are going to be these rectangles. So we create a grid for the whole country. So each of these squares has the same area as our circles, which are drawn around the power plant with a 15 kilometers radius. So we are going to treat these regions as the control regions to identify the impacts on the treated regions, which are the regions with the coal plant clusters. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question, because this could be a confounding effect. So in Spain, we have had coal mines, but those coal mines that were closed many years ago, now the coal power plants, they have been using imported coal, which is cheaper and more efficient and less polluting than the national coal. So the coal mines that were closed many years ago. Go.
Where they are looking at the Socialist Party most recent closures of coal plants, which could be residual. I mean, coal.
You mean a paper by Spanish authors?
I don't think it's Spanish authors, but certainly it's very well.
Yeah. I know that paper.
And they find that there is no political backlash.
I know.
Apparently, the just transition program was very effective, and local populations still supported the Socialist Party afterwards.
Absolutely. I know the paper well. So indeed, in these closures, Spain has created what is called the Just Transition Institute. They're putting in place-based policies to try to mitigate the negative impacts of these closures. I've met with them. They're following this work very closely. They're telling us we're doing our best to try to mitigate the adverse effects in all the localities, but in some places we simply cannot attract new investments because areas are extremely rural. In other places, it's extremely simple to convince one company to bring a new factory of batteries, a new factory of solar panels, but in some others not. And this is probably the reason why we find this underlying heterogeneity. But you're absolutely right. We should link that paper better with ours, but we are still not there. I know I'm running out of time, so I want to jump straight. Okay, thank you. I want to jump straight into the results. So the first thing that you're going to see at the national level. So here, the vertical line is denoting the announcement date. So normally, the announcement takes place more or less 2 years before the actual close down. So we see that in terms of employment, our treated regions are no different as compared to the controls until the announcement date, when employment already starts going down, and by the time the plant is closed, this reduction in employment seems to be permanent. To our surprise, however, when we look at the impacts of unemployment, we see either no impacts or we see slight reductions in unemployment. Okay, so what is the missing piece here? The missing piece is clearly migration. What we find when we look at population is that people are leaving the municipalities to the point that there's even, or at least according to this analysis, some overshooting. There are so many people leaving that unemployment might seem to be slightly going down. Okay, so clearly very negative socio-economic impacts. These are logs, so you can interpret the numbers as 1 to 2% reductions in employment.
With respect to the megawatt
No, sorry. This is just a 1-0. This is a 1-0 variable. This is a dummy variable saying whether the plant closed or didn't close. Most of these plants tend to be of the similar size. Okay, so this is just a dummy. We are going to have that dimensionality when I'm not going to get there, and we don't have the results there, but when we try to understand whether these people who are living, whether they're going to the municipalities where new renewable investments are taking place, there we try to capture. It's not the same thing as having one power plant of small size or one power plant of very large size. So there we are going to introduce the size effect of the renewable investments for sure. Okay, because clearly larger plants, they need more workers, and probably they attract more people. Who knows whether it's some of the people that were previously employed in one of these power plants. Okay, and again, I was talking about this with Francesco before. These power plants that are owned by the big utilities in Spain, Endesa and Iberdrola. So many of the transitions that have taken place within the firm. So the firm is closing down the plant, but is trying to reallocate its workers in other places where the firm is investing. So probably in this case, again, I don't have the results yet, but probably in this case, this is facilitating the labor market transition because of this within firm transition.
The underlying structure of the data is a connection per ex-employee, or I mean, the original data, you have the information on the company and the worker panel.
Yeah.
And at this both establishment at some level or only at the firm level? Because
I think it's firm level. Yeah. Yeah, but we know the province, so we know whether they're migrating from some of these in these regions where the plants are located. Luckily for our purposes, but probably not for the workers. There are not many renewables here because most of the renewables are there. So if they really are moving within the firm to new activities, we're going to see a change in the province, and probably this is explaining why we have so changes in population.
Identification of this transition, especially because I mean the brown workers and the workers are a small fraction. If you look at it,
I fully agree. It's truly challenging.
But if you can push this idea is very good. I think within firm across the establishment, the allocation this would be.
I wish I had the results to show them to you, but we don't. This is our hope. Okay, so in the future we'll get there. So without going into the details, to uncover the heterogeneity that is, characterizing these plant closures, we conduct a synthetic control analysis. Let me jump at the results. So this is the summary of our synthetic controls conducted at the plant level. I'm going to show you the different case studies, but this is just the average of the effects. And the results are surprisingly very consistent with what we get out of the event study. We see that employment is going down, population is going down. The effect of unemployment here is slightly positive, but in any case, it's extremely very, very close to zero. So this story seems to be very consistent, whether we look at the national level or whether we look at the various case studies. Clearly, there's a lot of heterogeneity because if we look at the average of the synthetic controls, which is marked here in solid line for employment, unemployment, and population, we see that in unemployment, there's not a lot of heterogeneity across all the case studies, but in employment and population, we get many different dynamics surrounding the closures of the power plants. So something that we want to do is similarly to what that paper does, try to exploit the type of place-based policies that were put in place in these municipalities and whether they were successful or not, to try to understand these different trajectories after the closure of the power plants. And we get, if we zoom in into the plant level analysis, many different stories. So this is the case of Andorra, which is a location up in the north in Teruel, and we see that this is a region that doesn't seem to recover. So employment goes down, and even after the plant is fully demolished, once the plant is demolished, there's like a big plot of land where new factories can come in, and there's idle interconnection capacity that can allow to bring new renewables and so on and so forth. So not even after the plant is demolished do we see positive impacts on employment or unemployment, and and people are leaving. So this is one region that doesn't recover. Yet we have another region, Alcudia, which is in Mallorca, that suffers a negative impact, but 2 years after the plant closure, everything goes back to normal. There's even people coming to the municipality. So probably there's many other things going on. It's clearly Mallorca, many other things are going on. It means that the region is less dependent on the plant, and the region can eventually recover. And then there's other regions such as Melilla, which is just one example of one region that doesn't seem to be impacted at all by the closure of the power plant.
How we interpret the coefficients, because -5 is, it's the coefficient of employment in the coal power plant.
No, this is the employment in the region at those times. And this is the coefficients. This is employment over population in 2023, so as to normalize, which is, those of you who have worked with synthetic controls, it's very important to have variables that are normalized to make them comparable and really pin down a good synthetic.
So -5 is something like -5.
Where are you looking at -5 here? This is the effect. This is the gap. This is the difference between the treated and the synthetic.
-5 percentage point between the ratio.
Yeah. The effects are really big. Yeah. In this case, no, it doesn't seem so. If you look at the placebos, it's no different. In the previous ones, they are truly very big. So this means that the ratio between employment and population falls 4 points relative to the synthetic. Yeah.
As a referee, I would be a bit worried about the size of the family, because I imagine that the share of the employment.
So to give an example, suppose that the share of employed people over population, I don't know, is 50% or it's 40%. It means that now it's 46%. Okay, so it's every year. Yeah, so I'm going to stop here because the truth is that the worker level analysis we are currently working on in here. So just very quickly, let me tell you what we have in mind, in case I'm sure you have a very good suggestions. We are trying to do a kind of gravity analysis to try to measure, looking at how many people leave from a coal region to other regions, whether they tend to migrate relatively more after the close down to those regions, J, where there are more renewable investments. And here we can take this to be a simple dummy, or in some other specifications, we are incorporating there the amount of investments there is in other municipalities. And we are trying to do the same type of analysis, not just across coal regions versus renewable regions, but also across transitions. And probably Francesco here will have much to say whether there's a transition between industries that can be considered to be coal-related industries towards industries that can be considered to be related to the renewable energies. Okay. This.
And alpha JP, that's typically what people want to see in gravity model.
With the T subscript here, this is a fixed effect. A bilateral fixed effect. Okay. Okay, good. Excellent. That's always very handy. That's always very handy to know. Thank you so much. We'll incorporate those. This is just for you to have a sense of what we plan to do. We haven't done it yet. So hopefully if you invite me again in the future years, I'll be able to tell you, yes, it worked, and there is within firm transition, or not even within firm transition is found in the data. So let me finish here by again stressing what I believe is an extremely important research agenda for those of you, for those of us, truly focusing not only on the design of the policies, but also putting together how policies are designed with the socioeconomic implications of those policies, including the distributional implications that also encompass clear distributional effects across the local municipalities versus the global effects. Thank you so much. I don't know if there's additional questions or yes.
Thank you for the presentations. So for the two papers, but now I'm curious. I mean, I would like to know the net effect. So, and is there any, it's just a question, general question, is there any evidence of the overall effect of the transition? And possibly this is much related to the question by Italo. So this is much, it is very much a thing that depends on the perspective at which you are looking at this interesting issue, because you're looking at the local perspective, but maybe, I don't know, whether you should look for a more distant perspective if you want to say something at the national political level. And curiosity, is there any results on that you are aware of related to this, or?
I fully agree. It very much depends on the perspective. So we want to understand why the local residents oppose or why they want to have to host some of these investments. You really need to look at the local level. If you are the prime minister of a country and you really want to understand whether you want to promote these investments, probably you need to look at the global effects without disregarding the local effects where this opposition can occur. Probably because of my own professional bias, I find it much harder to look at the global effects because probably there's many confounding effects. So we could, for instance, say, and at some point we thought, let's do it to try to compare the impacts. What has happened in Spain, taking into account all the investments that take place across all municipalities, okay? And we can do that. I'm not aware of any paper that has done this, but probably there's many confounding effects taking place at the same time that would provide a very noisy picture of what is truly going on. So if one could think of, I don't know, natural experiment that would allow for a cleaner estimation, I think it would be extremely relevant, because we were discussing about this before. You know, there's all these, you know, political discourse about the job multipliers of these investments, which I think is super important and super relevant. But what we are missing is sound evidence reporting that. And I know that Francesco and Mattia are doing some work in this direction, but I truly think that more needs to be done. I'm not aware of it.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting. Just out of a curiosity, so you have this story that there's a phase of phasing in of renewable energy and phasing out of dirty energy. But there is also a sector there is in the middle of this, which is the energy transition metals mining. So looking from the labor perspective, right? The skills that are required for the people to build the solar farms and wind farms, they are about equivalent to the people that are in the mining sector, maybe just require a little bit of training, but they would stay there much longer than the one building the farms.
Yeah.
I was wondering if, you know, you could incorporate this kind of employment into the story, because it would explain
and not only the mines, but also the factories where the blades are being manufactured, or the solar panels, and so on and so forth. So in that sense, a global analysis would make a lot of sense. But the problem is the mines are somewhere else. They are not in the same municipalities, and the factories, they are somewhere else. They are not in the same places. So if we want to try to understand whether there's losers and winners, I think this spatial dimension of the effect is very relevant. Again, I'm not saying it's the only one. For sure, it is not. It depends on which type of questions you really wanna address. And this is why I also think that this analysis of migration patterns is also very relevant, because if in your municipality there's an investment or there's a plant closure, it doesn't mean that you're a loser. You can move, right? So only looking at the local effects without looking at migration would provide probably a distorted picture, precisely when we are finding that many of the adjustments are through migration. So again, depending on the type of question that you want to address, I think you have to look at different levels of aggregation.
No, for me, because Spain is one of the biggest producers of this kind of metal, so it would be quite interesting to look at this dimension.
Yeah, probably that's a good point. So in our gravity model, probably we should throw in not only the municipalities with renewable investments, but also the municipalities with mines.
Thank you once again. I was thinking actually that whether in your data, you have some few maybe cases in which you had both a phasing out investment and a phasing in one. I wonder whether you can focus on this and maybe have a subsample of an exercise in which you try to see what was the net effect of the two. So just going again in the direction of the comment by Andrea, but focusing on the local markets.
Yeah, I think that is a great point, because indeed this Just Transition Institute, what they've tried to do is they've tried to bring in renewables into the same municipalities rather than having people migrate. You know, let's move the investments so that, and in some cases this is possible precisely because when you close down the power plant, you have all this interconnection capacity to the grid that can host additional renewable investments. So that's a very good point, and probably this is explaining some of the heterogeneity that we see in the data. So this is in our to-do list for the next few months. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just taking a couple of steps back and looking at the impact on the local communities. Are there any data concerning the impact of local taxes from the energy production that goes from to the local community? I remember reading last year that, for instance, in Minnesota, counties were receiving order of magnitude of $2 million from tax revenues. That is something that is not just on the year of construction, but is something to stay for all the production time of the plant.
Yes, we have some evidence on that in the renewables paper. And we see that indeed the public coffers, you know, they get richer, so the impact stays. So in Spain, we have a construction tax, and that's clearly just a one-off thing. But we also have a property tax, and we have an economic activity tax. And those profits, those tax revenues stay in the municipality even after construction. What we find is that this is helping increase per capita income, but this is not translated into new jobs. Okay, so the labor market effect of this increase in public revenues is simply not there, but clearly there are other type of benefits. The people who live and work in the municipality, probably they have better public facilities and so on and so forth, but the channel is not through the labor market. Okay. At least this is what we find.
Thank you. So still could help in winning the support of local communities for this type of ventures.
Absolutely, I think that is super relevant. And when it comes about thinking about the policies to mitigate this opposition, certainly the tax channel is a very important one. Excellent, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.